talking, Penske has a funding resource that's probably much stronger than Ganassi is at this point. I think that's part of the problem where, Ganassi is spreading some of those resources that they have a little too thin. They're maybe focusing primarily on the IndyCar series right at this point. Not that they aren't putting money in their stock car program with Kurt Busch and Kyle Larson, but I mean, you just take a look at just the situation that Ganassi had last year with DC Solar, who was a major funding partner with them both on their Cup Series side and in their Xfinity Series side, and they lost them because of legal problems the company was having, and I think that damaged Ganassi on their stock car racing side to some degree. You take a look at Ross Chastain, who won last night and who was tapped to run a full Xfinity Series season, and they had to totally shut down their Xfinity Series program just because of the fact of what happened with DC Solar. So, going back to it, Penske has manufacturing, Penske has a trucks, rental service. He's in all kinds of businesses other than just stock car racing, and while Ganassi does have outside resources, they just don't seem to be as many resources as you see with Penske, and why you see Penske kind of at the top of their game in many different forms of racing that they're in. And, if Ganassi were to diversify to some degree and maybe bring in some more funding partners. I know that he has a partner with him over at Chip Ganassi Racing, but, who's a billionaire in his own right. So, I just don't see a lot of money being put into their stock car racing side versus what we see at a Penske Racing at this point.
Steve, and we'll ask you this question because we were kind of talking about this before you came on, and I know Matt played the clip, but basically the statement was made that IndyCar and IMS needs to get rid of the Grand Prix and just focus on the Indy 500. I disagree with that. One, because it's wasted space. Two, because it does truly bring the month of May to Indianapolis, much like Daytona. You can equate the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to Daytona. Daytona does a full, almost I think close to a full month, but certainly a couple weeks building up to the main Daytona 500. And here's the other reason that I think a lot of people don't like the Grand Prix or they don't like the road races. As Will Power said yesterday in the press conference, people are just good, and it's very easy to have an all green race, and it takes something pretty significant, a pretty significant crash, if you will, or whatever, to get a full course caution on a road course because it's so spread out. So a driver can go into the tires or into the grass and not cause a caution, whereas in an oval they're going to go into the wall. But the problem is that a lot of people think is that it's just like there's no passing, there's no. So what are your thoughts on the road courses, and what are your thoughts about what we were talking about as far as IMS getting rid of the Grand Prix, which is not something that I agree with. It's not something Matthew agrees with. And yesterday in the leadership press conference, Doug Bowles said, ticket sales are up. I mean, the first year was magnificent because it was like we haven't had a second race year. So you had a lot of, let's see what this is about. And then you have your slump in a couple of years. But now the ticket sales are up because they're up higher than they've ever been except for the first year. He said that yesterday. So that tells me that that's an indicator that fans like to come to Indianapolis in the month of May, Steve.
Well, I think it's indicative of the fact that I think and I'm just going to equate this over to the NASCAR side at the same time, that, a lot of people, in the stock car racing world have kind of gravitated away from these 1.5-mile ovals, and they're really asking NASCAR to add more road courses. They're asking NASCAR to add more short tracks. And one of the discussions that has been a part of this is that, stock cars at Indianapolis have never traditionally, always put on the best racing. So people have said, well, why don't we just use the road course there, the same course that you guys are going to use in the Grand Prix? So I think, when you start looking at the mentality of the way that the tastes have changed both in, IndyCar and in stock car racing totally, more people are asking for these road course races. I'm not necessarily a fan of road course racing. It's just never something that I've been interested in. But there are a lot of people out there that like road course racing. And whereas you were talking about, drawing a full course caution in IndyCar, I mean, anything pretty much in stock car racing, when we go to Sonoma, we go to Watkins Glen, or, we go to Mid-Ohio and some of these other road courses out there between the series, it's pretty much every time it's a full course caution for us. You go into the rocks, you go into the tire barriers, whatever the case may be. It's a full course caution for us, regardless of the fact. Whereas there's some leeway in open wheel racing, and Formula One seems to have the same kind of mentality that not everything justifies a full course caution. As far as IndyCar is concerned, I think it's just, kind of just a prelude into the Indianapolis 500. You talked about Daytona 500 Speedway. We have the Busch Clash, we have the Twins, we have other things that go on at Daytona before we get to the Daytona 500, and it's the build-up to the Daytona 500, just as this is the build-up in the month of May for IndyCar. So they equate the same way, that fans are you're going to bring fans out there that are going to like the oval racing. You're going to bring fans out there that like the road course racing. And sometimes you can cross-promote those two and say, well, you came out for the road course. Why don't you come back to the Indy 500 and see what the Indy 500 is all about? Or maybe those Indy 500 fans that have never been to a road course race or one there at Indianapolis, you can cross-promote to them and say, hey, why don't you come out and take a look at this? You may find a fan that, then repeatedly comes back, and it's a new revenue stream for the Speedway. So for getting rid of it, I don't think that they should do that. I think that it's just the build-up to the Indianapolis 500. It gives them an opportunity to cross-promote to fans of one style of racing versus another, and it's good to continue to look at new ways to bring fans into the sport, and I think that's a way to do so.
Matthew, let's go to you. Obviously, one of the things that I want to talk about today is this huge partnership. And again, going back to the leadership press conference yesterday, Doug Bowles, and then also head of events at IMS, NBC executive, and there were a couple other people there with the leadership staff. Mark was there as well, answering questions. But one of the things that was talked about extensively, Kurt talked about it as well, Kurt Cavan, as well, and he's certainly been one of the masterminds or behind-the-scenes guy. Kurt Cavan, those of you that don't know him, was with the Indianapolis Star for years. Now is one of the big wigs in the communication and media world with IndyCar. He is directly responsible after qualification and after the poll is set and getting them sent off to major markets to be on shows like Late Night and be on Fox and Friends and be on all of these different big shows, to be on Ellen and all these other shows. Kurt's behind that. So he was one of the ones that helped put together this NBC deal. And I think it's great. I think ABC began to let IndyCar and IMS down and the city of Indianapolis down, the cross promotions, all kinds of things. At the Kentucky Derby, watching the Kentucky Derby, I was seeing IndyCar spots. In the NFL this year, I was seeing Indy 500 spots. So this cross promotion and this NBC agreement, and like I said earlier, I've been at a track all weekend, and there's really nowhere I can't go where I don't see NBC Sports signage. And quite frankly, they have more of a team than I've seen anybody. I mean, literally, I think every second pit box they have a pit reporter. They have it covered from top to bottom. They've got a big. Of course, it's going to be on network TV today. So they have a big setup, and they've invested millions of dollars into this sport with IndyCar. So this partnership with NBC is huge. Matthew, let's talk about that, and what are your thoughts?
Obviously, having NBC involved and a partner that is interested in the race and the full series, I think, is key. I think ABC, even though they had been the sole provider for so many years, they just seem like their interest just waned every single year beyond the time NBC started, or what was then Versus, took over a majority of the broadcast for the IndyCar series. And it's good to see that the Indy 500 is now being covered by a partner that is interested and takes a serious look at this. Because let's face it, last year's TV rating wasn't even above 1 last year, Tom. That's scary for an Indy 500.
No, I absolutely agree. Steve, what are your thoughts? We've seen this the same sort of partnership, if you will, with NBC. Now, Fox is kind of going a little bit away from NASCAR. NBC is gobbling everybody up, and now they have NBC Sports, as Matthew mentioned. They took over Versus. They are really in the market of providing the best sports coverage, race coverage that's out there and available to anyone and everyone. It kind of hurts for the Canadian drivers, and that's a whole other thing. I mean, Canadian fans, that's a whole other gamut. Unfortunately, there's not much that can be done about that as the regulations are what they are. But these huge mega media partnerships do nothing but help and benefit the particular sport or the particular racing venture, whether it's NASCAR or IndyCar, Formula One, or what have you. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I got two different thoughts on that. One, NBC it seems to have a strategic initiative in the fact that they want to cover motorsports racing, no matter what kind of motorsports racing it is. They're covering our K&N and modified series, although there's some discussion as to why they tape delay it and play it 10, 12 days later, and most people already know who won or read up on it, and they just don't get the ratings that, it justifies. But it does go to the fact of, they're looking to cover anything and everything sports and motorsports related particularly. So to have one particular partner that's going to put that kind of money and that kind of attention into a sport is always good for the fan. The fan gets to see new things that they may not have seen in the past. They get new people that get to come out. They get to see new faces that have new opinions and new ways of covering the race. So, these are net positives a lot of times for the race fan. As to, ABC and ESPN, well, we've known in the NASCAR world since the 90s, right before the big partnerships between Fox and TNT and, other providers, that ESPN just really didn't seem to care, and their leadership just did not seem to care about motorsports racing. They were sticking ball. They wanted to stay sticking ball. They put most of their money and most of their initiatives in sticking ball, and their motorsports coverage really just, waned a lot. And this is even going back on our side all the way back into the 90s, which predicated the fact of why ESPN just eventually said, okay, we're just not interested in covering NASCAR anymore. We've done it for 30, 35 plus years, but, we're just not interested anymore. And NBC came in and took their spot, and they've been a partner within, NASCAR of racing for the last couple of seasons. I say that because there are a lot of net positives into it, and it's a net positive both for fans and for the series, the tracks, drivers, and everybody, because, there's more money fluctuating into the sport. However, one of the biggest questions that continues to be had is that we understand sometimes how the TV industry works. And there's a lot of people out there that just don't have cable television. So when they put these things on NBCSN or other, for our instances, we've had races put on CNBC and other networks that are on cable, fans miss out. So the question has become, well, why are the ratings down sometimes at these races? Well, that's why, is because that's one of the reasons that it is down, is because of the fact that they put these on cable television. Many people are cutting the cord. They're looking at alternatives, don't necessarily have NBCSN or CNBC or any of these other opportunities or other channels, and they only have, over the air or whatever the case may be in their package, and that kind of has suffered a little bit on our ratings to some degree. And, I think NBC is trying to do and balance this in every way possible, but we all understand how the TV industry works. They can't always put it on, broadcast television every single weekend, and while the Indianapolis 500 is going to be on broadcast television, and rightfully it should be, because it should maximize the audience out there, We know things could happen. Things could rain out on a Sunday, and unfortunately on Monday they can't just put this thing on broadcast television. So, there are the positives, there are the negatives, but there's a lot of positives at the same time, and I think we'll see that